The Boston Celtics' playoff chances are in jeopardy because of what is, in my opinion, maybe the strangest and most unique injury that we've seen in this NBA season. Marcus Smart suffered an injury that we typically only see in younger teenage athletes. What's up, everybody? Welcome back. For those new, my name's Brian, and I'm a doctor and a sports fan, and it's my goal here to take a look at different sports injuries and sports medicine topics to try to teach you all a little bit more about what's going on. Today, we're focusing on Marcus Smart and specifically his oblique tear and the avulsion injury to his hip that has him expected to miss upwards of 6 weeks and significant playoff time. I always like teaching you guys about injuries that are really unique and not just your standard ankle sprains, ACLs, and so on, and this definitely fits that criteria. Understandably, people look at this footage and say, how is it possible that just simply bumping into another person can cause such a significant injury and an injury to the muscles in the abdomen? Well, it all has to do with the different rates at which the areas of our pelvis and the bones in our body solidify and turn into good, solid, mature bone in connection with the tendons that arise from them. Breaking down the official diagnosis that they released in terms of what this is. So the oblique is, of course, a muscle in the abdomen that we'll talk about in a little bit. And so they say there was a strain or a tear in the oblique muscle. But the more interesting thing is that they say he had an avulsion injury to his iliac crest. An avulsion injury implies that a piece of the bone actually broke away. So our tendons connect our muscles to our bones, and in an avulsion injury, something has caused that tendon to actually pull a chunk of the bone off. So this isn't just your average muscle strain or muscle pull. What they're telling us here is that a piece of the bone actually broke off of his iliac crest, which is your main pointy hip bones you can feel in your pelvis. Starting off as usual with our anatomy, so we have two oblique muscles in our abdominal wall. We have the internal and the external oblique. They're both involved in helping us breathe, but their main function as it relates to injury has to do with side-to-side bending and twisting. As they said, he had an avulsion injury to his iliac crest, so let's next point out some key structures in our pelvis. The iliac crest is the main sharp ridge that we see at the top of the pelvis that you can feel on yourself. And that's actually the area where these abdominal muscles, like the obliques, attach. Down lower, we have the ischial tuberosity, and this is where our hamstring muscles attach. And then we have the ASIS and the AIIS, which are points on the pelvis where muscles controlling our lower leg attach. I mentioned in the beginning of this video about this idea of the bones maturing and hardening. That's a process we call ossification, or forming and remodeling of bone. Whenever we are born, our bones are very soft, and as we age, our bones gradually harden and solidify. And they do this at varying stages. Not every bone solidifies and matures at the same rate. The next thing we need to understand is something called an apophysis. As we know, muscles attach to bones, and they do so through their tendons. Whenever our skeleton and our bodies are maturing, that point on the bone where the tendon is inserting or originating is called an apophysis. It's a normal sort of outgrowth of a bony center that ultimately will help to anchor the muscle to the main skeleton. Whenever we're going through our maturing and early stages of life, this apophysis has not really solidified and fused really hard to the rest of the bone. It's separated by this area that can be thought of as a sort of growth plate. And as we age, that area solidifies or goes through ossification to ultimately fuse and bond that connection really tight. But until that happens, those apophyses are at increased risk of fracture because it's soft, immature bone and cartilage. So when an injury like what Smart has happens in a younger athlete, we call it an apophyseal avulsion injury because it's that area where the tendon is maturing into the bone that's susceptible to fracture and gets pulled away or breaks. And that's why this is such a strange, unique injury, because Marcus Smart isn't a teenager. He's an older athlete, and so you might think that, well, his bones should have been fused and all the way mature. When we look at the areas of the pelvis that mature at different time points, the iliac crest, or that area where Smart had his injury, is actually one of the later sites on the pelvis to fully mature and solidify. And this happens later in life, around ages 21 to 25. And guess how old Marcus Smart is? 25. So he's right kind of at that exit point of when his pelvic bones are completely and fully matured in terms of those anchor points between the muscles and the bones. So there's nothing unique about Marcus Smart, just that his age makes him more susceptible to this type of an injury. Let's go back to the footage here of what happened. So everybody saw him make contact with the player on the other team and thought, that must be when this injury occurred. Yes and no. So these type of avulsion injuries nearly always occur because of a forceful contraction of the muscle. With any sort of forceful bending or kicking of the legs, those muscles contract really hard down and pull that apophysis or that chunk of bone away from the pelvis. These don't happen from just direct blow or direct contact. I guess theoretically it's possible that if something got hit just right in that spot where the bone was still maturing, that maybe something could break off. But what I'm guessing is much more likely is it wasn't the actual contact and force of the contact, but potentially the way that his abdominal muscles might have contracted in response to that hit. This might sound a little crazy, but I think all of this matters. So right before the injury occurs, we can see with him with his cheeks puffed as if he's trying to exhale or blow out air. You don't inhale with your cheeks puffed out, so we can assume that he's breathing out whenever this happens. Because he's exhaling, his oblique muscles are contracting, which already means that they're pulling on that bony spot. Next, whenever he makes contact, we can see that his upper body is rotated a little bit to the left in relation to his lower legs. Now, the internal and the external oblique muscles kind of work opposite of one another, but certainly those obliques on the left side are going to be firing to bend and turn his waist over to the side. So there's a couple of things here that are kind of going against him leading up to the contact, and then it's possible that the contact just stunned him to where he contracted those abdomen muscles to sort of guard or protect himself. But I don't think that the actual force of hitting the bone caused the bone to break and then the muscle to tear. What's more likely, again, is that something happened to cause him to contract those muscles really suddenly, and that pulled that susceptible spot of bone off of the iliac crest or off of the pelvis. So to quickly summarize things here, whenever our bodies mature and our skeletons and bones mature, they harden and solidify at different rates. The locations where our muscles and tendons connect to the bone are called an apophysis, and those regions around the body solidify and fuse to the rest of the skeleton at different time points. Before that time point occurs, that area is much more susceptible to injuries, and in particular something we would call an avulsion type of fracture. The apophyseal regions in the iliac crest where Smart had his injury don't fully mature and solidify until ages 21 to 25 roughly, and Smart is 25 years old. So his bones are still at that stage where they're more susceptible to injury, and so the perfect combination of muscle contraction and events can cause this type of apophyseal avulsion fracture. They rarely, if ever, do surgery for these types of things. Almost all the time they're healed conservatively, so I don't suspect he's gonna have to ultimately go to the operating room, but these are extremely painful. Even just basic breathing is really painful when this happens. And so at this point, forget about doing basketball activities. It's just letting that heal so that he can walk and talk and breathe without being in excruciating pain. That's it for the video, everybody. I hope it was educational as always. Let me know any comments below, questions you have about this topic or other injuries to discuss in the future. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.